Zaira adjusted the settings on her sanitation module, sighing as the device emitted a low hum. Humans were a curious species, she thought. They seemed to thrive in chaos, leaving scattered belongings in their wake. Her current assignment, a shared living arrangement aboard the Galactic Unity, had tested her patience more than any planetary expedition. Humans, it seemed, had little regard for tidiness. Approaching her roommate's quarters, Zaira braced herself. The human male, Cole, had proven to be an enigma. He worked tirelessly on engineering projects, often muttering phrases like, "Fix it or forget it," which her translator rendered in varying levels of incomprehensibility. She didn't dislike him, but his habits were a mystery. The door hissed open, revealing the familiar disarray. Tools, scraps of metal, and glowing components were strewn across the room. Her keen eyes scanned the clutter before landing on the bed. Cole was sprawled out, snoring softly, his arm draped over his midsection. And there it was. The tool. A long, sleek object rested precariously across his lap, gleaming faintly in the low light. It didn't resemble any standard equipment she had seen, and its placement added an air of intimacy. Zaira's heart rate spiked as she tried to reconcile the scene before her. Her species thrived on order and clear intentions. This was neither. She stepped closer, her gaze fixated on the device. The human's face was relaxed, a stark contrast to his usual focused demeanor. Was this a ritual? A token left in plain sight to signify something? Her species placed significant value on symbolic offerings. Could this be one of them? Her translator beeped softly, and she muttered a command to initiate a cultural database search. The result was both vague and alarming. Humans often present tools as extensions of their resourcefulness and capability. Offerings may indicate trust or partnership. Zaira froze. Partnership? Was he signaling an interspecies alliance of some kind? The tool shifted slightly as the human stirred. Zaira's breath caught. She considered retreating, but her sense of duty anchored her. If this was indeed a cultural gesture, ignoring it might lead to diplomatic fallout. And besides, the tool seemed important. Its polished surface, intricate grooves, and faint humming suggested advanced technology. Was it a prototype? A weapon? Or something more personal? Her curiosity overcame her hesitation. Reaching out cautiously, she touched the tool's edge. It was warm. Almost alive. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, it emitted a soft glow, projecting a holographic interface into the air. Symbols and diagrams swirled in alien patterns, their meanings eluding her. Cole shifted again, mumbling something under his breath. The translator scrambled to interpret. "Can't, too tight, adjust." Zaira blinked, her cheeks flushing a deep shade of violet. The phrases sounded suggestive, though the context was unclear. Was he addressing her? The tool? Or was he simply dreaming? A sudden beep from the hologram broke her train of thought. Lines of text appeared, and a voice, mechanical yet oddly soothing, began reciting phrases in a language she didn't understand. The sound startled Cole awake. His eyes fluttered open, groggy and confused. "Zaira?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "What are you doing?" Her hand snapped back, and she stood stiffly, trying to compose herself. "I was ensuring your quarters were in order," she said, her tone clipped. "Your device activated unexpectedly." Cole glanced down, realizing what she meant. "Oh, that's just a flux modulator. I was working on it earlier." He yawned, stretching. "Didn't mean to leave it there." Zaira's translator processed his words, but something about the phrase, flux modulator, translated poorly, rendering it as pleasure device for internal modulation. Her cheeks darkened further as she struggled to maintain composure. "You left it there intentionally?" she asked, her voice tinged with incredulity. Cole frowned, clearly confused. "What?" "No, I just fell asleep. It's just a tool." "A tool," she repeated, the word hanging in the air. Her translator seemed to take liberties with its interpretation, offering alternative meanings that ranged from personal device to Symbol of prowess. She swallowed hard, her mind racing to process the implications. Cole, oblivious to her turmoil, reached for the device. Yeah, it's nothing special. Just a prototype I'm tweaking for the engine room. Why? Her gaze flicked between him and the tool, her mind awash with conflicting interpretations. Was he genuinely unaware of the potential cultural signals he might be sending? Or was this some subtle human test? I misunderstood its purpose, she said finally, her voice tight. Cole chuckled, his sleepy grin disarming. Yeah, humans are weird like that. Don't worry about it. He set the tool aside, seemingly unaware of the chaos he'd inadvertently caused. Zaira nodded curtly, retreating toward the door. I will resume my duties elsewhere, she said, her tone betraying none of her inner conflict. But as the door closed behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had shifted something between them. Back in the corridor, she exhaled deeply, clutching her cleaning module like a lifeline. Humans, she decided, were far more complex than she had anticipated. And Cole, with his strange tools and easy laughter, was perhaps the most perplexing of them all. Cole rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess. Zaira stood stiffly, her posture unnaturally rigid, and her face had that peculiar violet flush he'd learned to associate with her being flustered. He blinked at her, then at the tool he'd set aside, and frowned. Did I miss something? Zaira's voice was tight, her words clipped. Your behavior was unexpected. My behavior? He asked, stifling a yawn. I was asleep. Yes, but the placement of your tool. Her eyes darted toward the object and quickly back to him, as though looking at it too long might burn her retinas. It was misleading. Cole leaned forward, trying to piece together her reaction. Misleading how? He asked, genuinely curious. Her translator chose that moment to betray her. Humans often signal readiness for partnership by presenting tools of significance. It chimed. Zaira's expression froze as her species' equivalent of horror spread across her face. Cole stared, then burst into laughter. Wait, hold on. You thought. He doubled over, his voice shaking with amusement. You thought that was some kind of romantic gesture? Zaira's jaw tightened, her dignity hanging by a thread. It is not amusing. My people take such symbols very seriously. Offering a tool in this manner suggests intent to establish a formal bond. He wiped a tear from his eye, trying to compose himself. Zaira, that's an engineering gadget. A flux modulator. It's not a token of affection. It's just something I was fixing. Her violet flush deepened, but her tone remained icy. Your species' customs are unnecessarily convoluted. Convoluted? It's a tool, he said, struggling not to laugh again. Not everything humans do has a hidden meaning. I am beginning to doubt that, she muttered under her breath. He grinned, his teasing tone softening. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse you. But I promise there was no grand gesture involved. Just me, falling asleep mid-project. She studied him, her analytical mind racing to reconcile his casual demeanor with the implications of what she'd witnessed. Your translator may be flawed, she said finally. It often interprets your phrases in ways that seem inappropriate. He tilted his head. Like what? Earlier you mumbled in your sleep. The translation implied. She hesitated, clearly weighing her words. It implied certain, intimate intentions. He blinked, then laughed again, louder this time. What did I say? Her translator beeped, replaying the earlier phrase. Can't, too tight, adjust. Cole's face turned red, his laughter mingling with embarrassment. Oh man, I must have been dreaming about fixing the stabilizers. That's engineering talk, Zaira, not anything else. She crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. Your species' dual-meaning phrases are unnecessarily confusing. You're telling me, he replied, still grinning. Half the time I don't even realize I've said something weird until someone points it out. She sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Perhaps you should consider being more precise. I'll work on it, he said with a chuckle. But hey, Now you've got a funny story to tell your friends. My colleagues would not find this humorous. Well, that's a shame, he said, leaning back against the headboard. Because I think this is the funniest thing that's happened all week. Her gaze lingered on him, the edges of her irritation softening. You find amusement in awkward situations? Of course, he said, shrugging. Life's too short to take everything so seriously. Sometimes you just have to laugh at yourself. That is an unusual perspective, she admitted. He tilted his head, studying her. What about you? Do you ever laugh at yourself? Her lips pressed into a thin line. My people value composure and discipline. So, no? She hesitated, then shook her head. No. Well, maybe it's time you gave it a shot, he said. I mean, come on, you've got to admit this whole thing is kind of hilarious. She opened her mouth to argue but paused. The absurdity of the situation, her standing there, debating the cultural significance of a random gadget, while he sat grinning like an idiot, was undeniable. A faint smile tugged at her lips. There it is, he said, his grin widening. Welcome to the world of not taking things too seriously. Do not assume this is a permanent shift, she warned, but her tone was less stern than usual. Fair enough, he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. But I'm glad you're starting to see the humor in it. She glanced at the tool, now innocuously sitting on the table. Your species is unpredictable. That's what makes us fun, he said, leaning back with a satisfied smile. Stick around long enough, and you might even start to like it. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she turned to leave. Unlikely, she said, though her faint smile suggested otherwise. The next morning, Zaira meticulously adjusted her uniform, replaying the events of the previous night in her mind. Despite her best efforts to dismiss the misunderstanding as irrelevant, it lingered like an unsolved equation. Humans, she decided, were a species of contradictions. Their capacity for humor seemed to both complicate and alleviate situations, a paradox that left her uneasy. She approached the dining area, where Cole was casually munching on a protein bar. He greeted her with a lopsided grin that somehow managed to appear both charming and infuriating. Morning, Zaira. Sleep well? Well enough, she replied, keeping her tone neutral. I trust you did not misplace any additional tools during the night. He chuckled, shaking his head. Nope, all tools accounted for. Though I have to say, last night was probably the most entertaining misunderstanding I've ever had. She tilted her head, her expression skeptical. You derive entertainment from embarrassment? Not embarrassment, he clarified. Just the absurdity of it all. It's like life has a way of throwing curveballs, and you either laugh or let it drive you nuts. Curveballs? She echoed, her translator offering a baffling array of meanings ranging from unexpected events to erratic projectiles. Unexpected situations, he explained. Like you thinking my flux modulator was some kind of romantic offering. Her cheeks flushed a faint violet again. I see no humor in such misinterpretations. He leaned forward, a mischievous glint in his eye. Really? Because I think it's hilarious. I mean, imagine what the crew would think if they found out. Her expression hardened. You would not dare. Relax, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Your secret's safe with me. Besides, it's way funnier as an inside joke. She studied him, her analytical mind struggling to reconcile his easygoing nature with her own rigid expectations. You are an anomaly, Cole. I'll take that as a compliment, he said with a wink. Before she could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life, summoning them both to a mandatory briefing. The interruption was a welcome distraction, and Zaira quickly turned on her heel, heading toward the command deck. The briefing, however, only added to the day's peculiarities. The captain, a stern-faced Phiontrian, outlined a routine inspection of the ship's systems. All crew members were assigned tasks, and to Zaira's dismay, she was paired with Cole to oversee the engine room diagnostics. As they descended into the bowels of the ship, the air thick with the scent of lubricant and ozone, Zaira braced herself for the inevitable chaos. Cole whistled cheerfully, seemingly unfazed by the labyrinthine maze of pipes and conduits. "So, what's the plan?" he asked, tossing a wrench from one hand to the other. "We follow the protocol outlined in the inspection manual," she replied, her tone clipped. "Efficiently and without deviation." "Got it," he said, though his grin suggested he had little intention of adhering to such rigidity. True to form, it didn't take long for Cole to deviate from the plan. While Zaira meticulously checked the control panels, he began tinkering with a nearby valve assembly, muttering to himself as he worked. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her irritation mounting. "Improving efficiency," he replied without looking up. "This valve's been sticking lately. Thought I'd fix it while we're down here." "That is not part of the inspection," she snapped. "Your unauthorized actions could compromise the system." "Relax, Zaira," he said, flashing her a disarming smile. "I know what I'm doing." Her frustration boiled over. "Your cavalier attitude is precisely why misunderstandings occur. You act without consideration, creating unnecessary complications." He paused, his expression softening. "Zaira, I get it. My way of doing things probably seems reckless to you. But sometimes the best solutions come from thinking outside the box." "Outside the box?" she echoed, the translator once again offering an array of perplexing interpretations. "It means being creative," he explained. "Not everything can be solved by following a manual." She hesitated, his words challenging the rigid framework of her upbringing. "And what if your creativity results in failure?" "Then I learn from it," he said simply. "That's part of being human. We screw up, we laugh, and we try again." Her gaze lingered on him, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. "Your methods are unorthodox." "Maybe," he admitted. "But they work." Before she could respond, the valve assembly hissed, emitting a jet of steam. Cole jumped back, laughing despite the near mishap. "See? Problem solved." "Mostly." She shook her head, exasperation mingling with reluctant admiration. "You are incorrigible. And you're too uptight," he countered with a grin. "Maybe we balance each other out." The remark caught her off guard, its underlying truth resonating in a way she wasn't prepared to confront. She turned back to the control panels, her movements mechanical as she tried to regain her composure. As they finished the inspection, Zaira found herself reconsidering her initial impressions of Cole. His methods might be chaotic, but there was an undeniable charm in his unpredictability. Perhaps, she mused, there was value in embracing a bit of chaos after all. Zaira stood at her workstation later that evening, absently polishing a set of precision instruments. Her thoughts drifted to Cole's words in the engine room. His approach to life, so careless and yet so effective, was an enigma she couldn't ignore. His laughter still echoed in her mind, disarming and oddly infectious. Her species prided itself on logic and precision, but for the first time, she wondered if perhaps they were missing something. The ability to adapt, to laugh in the face of adversity, these were qualities she hadn't valued before. Yet Cole embodied them effortlessly, and it intrigued her. She didn't have long to ponder. A notification pinged on her console, summoning her to the common area. When she arrived, she found Cole lounging in one of the chairs, a lopsided grin on his face, and a strange object in his hands. "What is that?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "It's for you," he said, holding it out. "Think of it as a peace offering." She hesitated, eyeing the object warily. It was a tool, not one of her precise instruments but something far cruder, with a patched-together look that screamed human ingenuity. She took it reluctantly, turning it over in her hands. "I modified one of the diagnostic wrenches," he explained. "It's got a built-in stabilizer now. Should make your work easier." Her translator conveyed his words clearly, but she still struggled to process the gesture. "Why would you do this?" He shrugged. "Because I figured you'd like it. And because I kind of owe you after last night." Her brow furrowed. "You owe me nothing. The misunderstanding was mutual." "Maybe," he admitted. But I still wanted to make up for it. Call it my way of saying thanks for putting up with me. She studied him, searching for hidden motives, but his expression was open, sincere. The gesture was baffling, unnecessary even, but it touched her in a way she didn't fully understand. Your customs continue to perplex me, she said, her tone softer than usual. Welcome to the human experience, he replied with a grin. We're a messy bunch, but we mean well. She set the tool down carefully, as though it might break under the weight of her scrutiny. You are unlike anyone I have ever encountered. Good different or bad different? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I have not decided, she admitted. You challenge my understanding of logic and efficiency. And that's a bad thing? Not necessarily, she said, surprising herself. His grin widened. I'll take that as a win. They fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the ship filling the space between them. Zaira found herself studying Cole, not his actions this time, but his presence. There was an ease about him, a quiet confidence that she found oddly reassuring. Cole, she said after a moment, her voice unusually hesitant. Yeah? Do you ever second-guess your methods? All the time, he said without hesitation. But I figure it's better to try and fail than not try at all. His answer was simple, yet it carried a weight that resonated with her. She nodded slowly, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. Do you ever second-guess yours? He asked, his tone gentle but probing. She looked away, her grip tightening on the edge of the table. I have always trusted in discipline and protocol. They have never failed me. But, she said reluctantly, perhaps there is merit in other approaches. He leaned forward, his expression serious for once. You know, you don't have to figure it all out right now. Life's not about having all the answers. Sometimes it's just about enjoying the ride. Enjoying the ride, she repeated, the phrase foreign yet oddly comforting. Yeah, he said, leaning back with a satisfied smile. And if you ever need a co-pilot for that ride, you know where to find me. Her cheeks flushed violet again, but this time she didn't bother hiding it. Your confidence is impressive. It's a survival skill, he said with a wink. You'll get the hang of it. She couldn't help but smile, a small but genuine expression that felt strange on her face. Perhaps I will. As she left the room, the modified tool in her hand, she realized something had shifted. Cole hadn't just disrupted her routine, he had opened her mind to a new way of thinking. And for the first time, she didn't mind the chaos.